after the 12. So good afternoon, everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon. My name's Gemma Van Houdren. I'm the director of the Statistics Division here in United Nations ESCAP, the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And it's my great pleasure to be coming to you today at this Asia Pacific Stats Café on a really important topic for all of us, financing statistical development. The statistical community has been very active in this area of financing statistical development, and as part of our journey towards the World Data Forum this year, the virtual World Data Forum this year, as well as the physical World Data Forum in 2021, we're very honoured to bring to you speakers from around the globe and our region on the topic of bringing sort of greater clarity, greater transparency, and greater momentum to this important topic. So for those of you who have not joined a Stats Café before, the procedure is we'll have a few speakers on various aspects of the topic, and then we'll allow about 15 minutes at the end of the session for question and answer. So as you go through the session, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat box, which you can access at the top of your screen. There's a little icon that looks like a chat, a message function, and you can put your question in the chat box. Or alternatively, when we call for questions and answers, there's a hand function where you can raise your hand and we can invite you to share your question with our panel today. The connection is quite strong, but if you do find at any time you have some internet connections, I would encourage you to turn your video off. Just keep your sound on, but your video off. And I do encourage you to keep yourself on mute throughout so that our speakers are loud and clear. But our team of technicians at this end will turn you on mute if you aren't on mute. So without further ado, I have the real great pleasure now to play a pre-recorded video of Miss Ayush Arianzi, who is now Her Excellency Minister Ayush Arianzi, Minister for Labour and Social Protection in the Mongolian government. Colleagues, Miss Ayush, over to you, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to see you all again in this endeavor and being a part of this important exchange between data producers and data users and speak to you all in the Asia Pacific statistical community. So the topic of financing data is not actually new, but it was brought back into the forefront by the Dubai Declaration, as you remember, of the second UN World Data Forum in 2018. The Bern Network has taken up this challenge, and today's exchange is a consequence of it. I would also like to thank Swiss government, of course, as well as ESCAP for organizing today's Stats Café. First, we need to ask us the question, why is more and better data funding, better funding for the data and statistics is important nowadays? We have known it actually as statisticians long time before, but the current pandemic has once again shown us very clearly that reliable, high quality, and above all, comparable data and statistics are the key to making political decisions, and the right ones. In my previous role as chairperson of National Statistical Office of Mongolia, of course, my team and I have produced these figures and the data and made them available for politicians, policymakers, and the widely public. And today, as Minister for Labour and Social Protection of Mongolia, I am on the other side of the table, and I actually am in demand and seek for important information, not only from statisticians, but also from administrative data. I can say here and now, yes, I want and need more data and more statistics which are reliable and timely. Only with comparable data can I make efficient decisions to improve the situation of Mongolia's citizens, to have better choices, better decisions. Of course, I have an interest in improving the situation in our region and also globally. The data and statistic needs more and better funding. Otherwise, the situation will not change, and we will ask ourselves in 10 years, why didn't we act in the right time and have not invested? We need to take action now, and I'm really ready to support it also, not only in my ministry, but in the whole government, in the whole country. So this second question we need to ask us, which approaches have been and are being pursued? Before the Bern Network was actually founded by Swiss government, commissioned by Paris 21, to conduct studies to find out how big the data gap is worldwide and to discuss and evaluate different approaches to close this gap. It was concluded that domestic resources are the most sustainable form of financing. I share this assessment. Of course, the domestic resources are the main important form of the financing. Nevertheless, I also point out that these resources are not available in many countries, including Asia and the Pacific, in the most vulnerable countries, in the most developing countries. Not only more, but also better financing is a track that we have to follow. In other countries, developed countries, there are a lot of financing mechanisms there, but it can be better managed. A more efficient use of existing resources is a central importance. We are now in the situation also where we need concrete actions. We have talked too much. We have too much policy documents. Now it is time to act. We cannot start the discussion from the scratch again and asking ourselves questions about whether there is more or better financing and what approaches lead to this. We need to take action now, and I'm ready to support it and be the part of it. Thirdly, we can also ask ourselves, what can we do in our region to support these processes? So the Asia Pacific's Stats Café today is also an example of what our region can do together. We can come together and discuss our common interests, our shared challenges, our shared priorities, our shared ways and projects. We can actively support groups such as, for example, the Bern Network of Paris 21, who are working to improve the situation. We can also build our own in the region. We also can give these groups full support, today, tomorrow, and together. So two important events that need collective support are the upcoming, are of course the upcoming World Data Forum, the third World Data Forum, which will be held virtually just in a few weeks, and the UN World Data Forum in person, which will be held in Bern, Switzerland. So please do register to this virtual UN World Data Forum and join many conversations for better financing for the data and statistical development. Asia Pacific needs better representation, and I urge my fellow colleagues to be more active and more loud and visible at all platforms, to connect with users of statistics, to be champions of the work that we are actually doing ourselves, hear about their needs, their priorities, engage with users, invest in statistics, and more into explaining statistics, make it more useful and understandable. After all, one of Asia and the Pacific's agreed actions for advancing official statistics for 2030 agenda, we need to take action now. And again, I am ready to support it and be part of it. I thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. And Ayush, as she's known across our region, has been very active in this area of financing for development. And it's really encouraging to see, despite her new role as minister in the Mongolian government, she's very still committed to this overall topic of greater and better and more efficient financing for development. It's now my great pleasure to invite Mr. Thomas Gass, the head of South Cooperation Department in the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation of the Swiss government, to share with us the road to Bern and the importance of financing for statistical development. Thomas, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, it's a really great pleasure to be with you this afternoon and this morning in this Stats Café. I take it also from the picture of that delicious cup of coffee that's in the background, in your background, Gemma, that there's also a somewhat informal side to this workshop or to this cafe, and therefore I don't want to be too formal. I want to say a few things, let's say, straight from the heart, and also help to mobilize us all to make financing for statistical development more of a reality. I've been back in my capital now for a little over 2.5 years, excuse me. Still a bit early here in Bern. Been back since beginning of 2018, where I actually work in the operational side of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. And it was interesting to me, coming from the UN Secretariat, working very close with the Statistics Division, Stefan and Francesca and the others there, to come back into the operational world of development cooperation, and to notice how sometimes far apart these two worlds are. Of course, 2015, the 2030 agenda, but also the tremendous work that was done by the Statistic Commission of the United Nations in preparing the indicators for the targets of the SDGs, I mean, has brought those two worlds together. But there's still so much more to do to really be able to speak the same language between us. And I must say that I've noticed that one of the challenges that I have is to bring a strong narrative for the importance of statistics. You see, in the day-to-day operations of development cooperation, it's all about rapid outcomes and impact, and we want to make sure that we take the right decisions rapidly, and often the statistics come too late, and are not accurate enough, or are not complete enough, or not disaggregated enough. And so many development partners in their projects develop their own databases, which are unfortunately then delinked from the National Statistical Systems. So I want to put this challenge on the table at the beginning, at the onset of this cafe, because I know that those of you who are around the table, you are aware of this challenge, and together we can find better ways to really bridge those two worlds and make sure that the narrative is very strong, because many countries don't have the privilege of having ministers such as Minister Ayush, who have actually been in both worlds. Now, the COVID-19 crisis actually has given the whole global community a really strong jolt, and has especially made vulnerable segments of our societies, it has touched them in a very special way and very strong way. And when you don't have a social security number, when you don't have a savings account, when you don't have a fridge at home, then being on lockdown can be really nearly a death sentence for people. And so across the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually made a group of people visible that in many countries were not yet visible, or we didn't really want them to be visible. Even in rich countries such as Switzerland, we have had people lining up in thousands to get food handouts from food pantries. So the COVID-19 crisis has kind of put a finger on some really important blind spots of our knowledge about how resilient society is. Now we know intellectually, we know that the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs cannot be fulfilled without proper data, and we say that, but we still need to make sure that that the development cooperation managers, that the ministries of plan and of finance in the countries that we work with, that they are convinced that an investment into into statistics is the right way to go, because many development cooperation agencies don't really have a mandate to strengthen their funding for statistics. So statistics is for many a tool, is something that will strengthen our impact, and that is what we have to engage in. And that is the purpose of the Bern Network on financing data for development. And I'm so glad that many of you are actively participating in that. And I see Benny Roten, Johannes Jutting, and others, but also from around the world, also participating in the activities of this Bern Network. And because of the postponing of the conference, which should have been held, I guess, this coming week now in here in Bern, we have one more year to get our act together and really make sure that we have something strong on the table, a strong argument, a strong narrative, so that we can move into this decade of action to implement the Sustainable Development Goals with the right databases in our hands. And some of you may know that I am also chair of the Global Partnership on Effective Development Cooperation. The Asia Pacific region is a very strong participant in the GPEDC, as it is known. Of course, you know that the whole Busan partnership actually started in your region, and we have Bangladesh actually also currently a very strong co-chair. And within that work, we also have a work stream on data. We want to make sure that all the members of the Global Partnership on Effective Development Cooperation make that link between effectiveness of development cooperation and availability of data. We want to make sure that the implementation, that the budgets and that the development planning at a national level is strongly aligned on the SDGs, and that this is all underpinned with strong data in the countries. And personally, I believe that there is a case to be made for development cooperation projects to be systematically connected with the statistics systems, with the national statistics systems in the countries in which we are working. It should be very easy when consultants prepare a project, when negotiations are on the way to prepare a project, very easy to actually connect, make sure that there is also an analysis of the strength of the that are in place, and to see how the future project can actually provide data to the national statistics system. The Clearinghouse for Financial Development Data is another project which actually emerged out of a breakfast discussion that we had last July in 2019 on the margin of the high-level political forum in New York. And I think a number of you were present there. And this idea that in the absence of a strong funding, a strong fund, central fund on statistics, that at least we should put together a virtual platform that can bring the needs and the availability of funds for statistics into the same space, where we can see where the gaps are, where we can see where opportunities are, where we can also see, and this is really important for the community here around the table, where we can see concrete positive examples of how development cooperation and statistics has been working together to make more impact and to improve the effectiveness of development cooperation. So this is what the Clearinghouse for Financial Development Data is all about, and Johannes is going to say a little more about that just now. We're looking forward, especially from you all, to get a lot of positive and strong examples that we can put on the table. Finally, I'd like to just recall how important it is to reach out, for us all to reach out and build awareness that achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and living up to the promises of the Agenda 2030 will require more and better data. Data that makes the interlinkages between sectors and the externalities of our development trajectories visible. Data that makes the vulnerable visible and helps us understand the risks, the environmental, the economic, the political, the social risks that these most vulnerable people are facing, but also data that strengthens the link between duty bearers and rights holders, and that strengthens the accountability of states to their people. We don't just need data that is provided to the donors. We need data that is provided to the people so that the people can get involved and so that domestic interest and resources can be mobilized for data. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Really very inspiring. As you know, every time I hear about the objectives of this better financing for data, for the 2030 agenda, for statistics more generally, it just reinforces the really valuable role and the leadership role that the Swiss government is playing here. The narrative, you've said this many times, the narrative is so important, and it's about building a narrative that our investors, if you like, our beneficiaries of the work that you're leading, that so many people are contributing to, is important. So I do hope that in our question and answer we can get some good points for the narrative that would resonate with the policymakers here in Asia and the Pacific. On that note, I would invite now Mr. Johannes Uting from Paris 21. He really doesn't need any introduction here in Asia and Pacific, very well known for all the work that Paris 21 do for us, the statistical community, and for countries in our region. And Johannes, please do invite you to speak now and share with us developments with the network. Thank you very much, Johannes.
Good afternoon. Hello, Gemma. Hello, colleagues. Hello, Thomas. It's so good to see you, at least virtually, some of you. And thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very happy to be part of this Stats Café. What I would like to do in the few minutes I have is maybe addressing 3 questions. Luckily, I'm speaking after Thomas and after Minister Ayush, so the stage has been set, so I can very nicely follow up on the stream that my colleagues have already set out. So the first question I want to address is why, a little bit the storyline, a few additional reflections on why do we need a Bern network for better development finance, and why do we need more specifically a clearinghouse, and how could it help? The second question is more, what is the Bern network, and go a little bit more into detail. And last but not key elements and how can you engage? How can you all on this virtual call become part of the Clearinghouse movement and the Bern Network as we go into the October months? And October will be the Statistical Day, as well as will be the World Statistics Day, as well as will be the UN World Data Forum. Now, in terms of why do we need a Bern network in the first place, and why do we need to think about a clearinghouse? I think Minister Ayush has already mentioned the link to the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs and the agreement of the international community to have a common goal framework. And I think the statistical community has delivered in terms of putting and thinking about the Sdg Data Framework, which is really needed to underpin the achievements and to be able to track and monitor, are we on track to follow the SDGs, and do we have the data to make this happen? And as you all know, I mean, we have discussed this in many fora, there are data gaps, there are important missing information for policymakers to make good decisions at the national level, at the regional level, at the global level, but also at the very local level. So there is, and this has been done also by the statistical community, we have an idea of how much money we actually need to fill this data gap and also to be able to deliver on the data we need. In addition, I would like to add that the question, it's not about more money, it's about also more efficient spending of money. And this has come through quite a lot of times when we were talking to those who provide the funds, who say, yes, we see your argument, but we need to be convinced the money is well spent. And one of the key problems is this coordination exercise. How can we get better coordinated at various levels, and in particular at the country level, that those resources who are made available are efficiently spent? I wanted to add one quick other argument, and I think Thomas has alluded to it already. It's the COVID-19 pandemic. And from a perspective of a statistician, I don't know how you all feel, it's a little bit of it's a bit ambiguous. On the one hand, all over this world, we now have conversations about data and statistics. Even at dinner tables, maybe you all in your families discuss with your children, what is an R value and infection rates, and is it a sampling framework? Was it well done and not? So I think everybody is now talking about data and statistics, and this is a very good thing. It's our opportunity. On the other hand, you also see that sometimes people get a little bit confused because they see that there are many different ways of measuring things, and there's not one professor who says it's not, you know, the academic world as well as the statistical world. There is not one data point measuring the thing you want to look at. So the key call here, it seems to me, for trusted data ecosystem. The word trust is so essential. And to some extent, I mean, with all this popping up of more and more data from often the private sector and from academia and so on and so forth, for me, at least personally, it has clearly shown there is a global public good, trusted data as a global public good, which is really needed in order to have citizens being convinced that measures that are taken on the basis of those data are acceptable. We have now to take very hard decisions about constraining our private life. And I think we are only ready to do so if we are convinced that the analysis and the data are sound. So in that sense, I mean, to have something, trusted data ecosystems is really key. And for trusted data ecosystems, we need some funding. It's like a global public good, like we have in climate change and others. So I just want to put this additional argument on the table, maybe for discussion. Now, let me come to the second point, the Bern Network. If it wouldn't have been created, it should have been created now. That's for sure. And I like the Bern Network basically for three reasons. First, it's Bern. The Bern is in the word. Bern is a very nice city, close to Germany and close to France, and it's the city of Switzerland. And we had wonderful meetings there as Paris 21. Some of you have been there. And it's great to have this in the name. And we have, of course, the UN World Data Forum twice now. We have this year virtually, and next year in being there physically. The other part is the network part. Network meaning that for the first time it's an informal network, so you can all join. It's not binding by any guidance and complicated rules. It's a combination bringing together the aid community and the statistical community. And we have wonderful institutions. We have the UNSDs, we have the World Banks, we have Open Data Watch, we have TPSDD, we have Paris 21, and many, many, many more. We have bilateral donors who are part of this. ESCAP, JAMA is quite engaged. So it's really a network that tries to think out of the box how we can provide more and better funding to statistical systems and to data ecosystems. Paris 21 is very happy to be the secretariat, and we are also very grateful for the seed funding from the Swiss government, but it's also very clear we need to step this up as we go along. Now let me come to the third point and to my closing remark. This is about the Clearinghouse, and Clearinghouse, I think it's Thomas has to be congratulated because he had this idea. I mean, I have to say in the beginning I didn't fully understand what he meant, Thomas, if I may say so, but I'm now really excited about the idea that Thomas has put on the table, because the Clearinghouse is, what does it really do? It's a smarter financing for development data portal. It will be a virtual portal. Now you might say we have already a lot of portals out there, aid management portals and other portals. But this one, we hope, all with your help, will make really a difference. And to some extent, for those who are economists, one could say, I mean, it will better bring supply and demand together. So supply meaning we have lots of aid projects, as you know. I mean, we have many statistical projects. We have projects supporting educational systems. We have statistical support projects in education, health, and others. But we also have censuses, we have foundational. So to have a better overview of what is actually going on and what is funded is very important. So I'm looking here on my left-hand side screen is a first mock-up. I didn't want to show to you because I want to invite you already to a very exciting session on the 20th of October, where we will show, and for the first time show a prototype of this Clearinghouse. So you will see on the one hand, you will be able to track funding flows, funding going to data and statistics. You will be able to discover funding opportunities, because we want to go away from data funding gaps. I think the wording, and this again is, I think, Gemma, the narrative, the more we think about it and talk more to people, and we have sent out questionnaires, I think we have to change the wording from funding gaps to investment opportunities. I think you said it yourself. So discovering funding opportunities in given countries, if there is a certain country that hasn't had a census and that was postponed, perhaps because of the pandemic, we need to know, as aid managers, you want to know where you can invest and who is investing as well. So to avoid a duplication, so we can spend the money where it's most needed. So there will be a certain button discovering funding opportunities. Engaging with partners. So the platform will also allow to engage and to help others to engage in terms of finding local coalitions to make a change. And last but not least is, and this has come out through the conversation we have with our GPDEC partners, with our partners in our partner countries, with representatives from planning agencies or from national statistical offices. They were telling us what we need is not only help us to find what's currently going on in my country, let's say in Mali. If I'm the chief statistician of Mali or of a Pacific island, I want to have a good idea of what kind of funds, domestic resources there are in my country, what kind of funding is. But I may also want to convince my planning minister that in the net budget round, I get the money I need for my activity for the next 2 years. So I need some stories that help me. So the platform will also provide the narratives that we were just talking about. So that you can build, like building blocks, that you can, for your own country, make a story that can hopefully convince your own government to make an investment. I think this has come out very clearly out of the analysis we did. the best resources for better funding would be coming from domestic resources. So if you convince your own government to invest in good data and statistics, that will be the first top priority funding. This being said, I'm also very convinced that the international community, for the global public good argument that I made, needs also to step more up. So coming to the end of my short intervention, this is really exciting. We have the World Data Forum coming up. The Clearinghouse, I really would like to invite you to send us an email to engage. I think it could become something really very interesting. We have a bit of more time now, which is good. This would be a collective community effort. And I think the statistical and data community, we have shown that we could do it. And with your help, I think I'm very can come up with something very nice and important then by next year. And if we hopefully see us at some time next year again, we can launch it, and we at the end of the day we will fulfill the goal to have more and better funding available at the community level, at the regional level, and at the global level. So with this I close, Gemma, and back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johannes. And Johannes, you mentioned there a couple of times now the Clearinghouse will be part of a session on the 20th of October. The program for the World Data Forum is still very high level. Can you just tell us exactly what the session is on the 20th? Because there's no details yet on the program. Do you have a number or a name for the session?
I do. I have to check it up to be very sure. I will put it in the chat if that's okay.
Yes,
so
that'd be wonderful.
I will look for it right now, and then I put it in the chat so you can maybe circulate it with the colleagues.
Yes, that'd be great. Thanks very much, Johannes. I'm quite keen to get people to that session for you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Johannes, and again, thank you, Thomas, for really two great initiatives and great sharing of information with us. Now, before we conclude, we have with us another video. Krishna, if you could get the video, we have Francesca Perucci from UN DESA Statistics Division, who's going to talk to us about the upcoming World Data Forum and do a segue through to our concluding remarks from Pierre. Again, if you have any questions, please do start thinking about them, put them in the chat box, and we'll be with you in a minute.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion today, and many thanks to Gemma and the other colleagues at the Statistics Division at ESCAP for the opportunity to contribute to this dialogue on financing for statistical development. 1/3 of the way in our path to the realization to the 2030 agenda, the world is off track, and countries are still lacking the data they need to inform the measures and policies to move closer to the goals and to assess whether or not they are making progress. Less than half of the countries have internationally comparable data for 4 of the 17 goals, and a large number of the indicators have data with a significant time lag. For instance, in at least half of the countries worldwide, the latest data point available for poverty indicators in Goal 1 is for 2016 or earlier. And now the data are more urgently needed than ever before, as timely information is critical to mitigate the spread of the pandemic and plan for the recovery, and the implementation of the agenda is off track. Statistical operations are disrupted by office closures, poor connectivity in many countries, and overall interruptions of face-to-face data collection. The pandemic has not only caused a setback in the implementation of the 2030 agenda, it is also exacerbating global data inequalities. In a recent survey to national statistical offices by our statistics division, the World Bank, in cooperation with the regional commissions, 79% of low and lower middle income countries indicated that as a result of the pandemic, they have a need for increased financial support to maintain a regular flow of information. And they stressed that to combat the growing inequalities in statistical production, there is a need for strengthening the technical capacity and the digital infrastructure. Clearly, the time is now for the development partners to launch a strong, coordinated effort of targeted investments for the development of new skills and upgrading of digital infrastructures for countries in greatest need to be able to modernize and innovate their national statistical and data systems. There is an increased pressure to establish better mechanisms for international support to country statistical systems, to make a better use of the existing finances and improve efficiencies in linking international support and domestic resources. The high-level group for partnership, coordination and capacity building for statistics has taken up the issue of financing in their work to define a better path for the implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan for data. They have identified a series of principles for financing to be more effective, including, for instance, country leadership and ownership, accountability, both from the perspective of the recipient countries and the donor to ensure that investments produce results, innovation and use of technology, both for capacity building projects and at the basis of a mechanism that matches donors and recipients, engagement with multiple stakeholders, partnerships, transparency and flexibility. And as we've heard, the Bern Network has worked very intensively to define the way forward, and there in the establishment of the Clearinghouse, they are fulfilling those principles and responding to the need of placing countries' priorities at the center. And they are responding to the need to establish an efficient way to integrate international support and domestic resources. At the forthcoming UN World Data Forum this month, the global data community is launching an outcome document that calls for accelerated action on the implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan and the Dubai Declaration, agreed at previous fora, as a key response to the COVID-19 pandemic and to put us back on track towards the achievement of the SDGs. The document also contains a renewed call to increase investments in data to respond more effectively to the COVID-19 pandemic and to build stronger, more agile, resilient statistical and data systems to respond to future crises and disasters, and to address the huge data gap in informing the implementation of the 2030 agenda, close the digital divide and data inequality across the world. And the forum will be the opportunity to present to a wide audience the new Clearinghouse for Financing Development Data developed by the Bern Network and highlight new findings on the state of financing for development data. After October, we will continue the conversation and the work leading to the Data Forum next year in Bern, where we hope to meet all in person. And we'll showcase the developments in the use of the Clearinghouse and announce new commitments. Thank you very much.
Very much. It was great that Francesca could share with us the developments for the World Data Forum, and in the chat box there, both details of the session at the World Data Forum have been put in the box. It's on the October 21 from 4 till 5:15 on Wednesday the 21st. Thank you very much, Benjamin and Johannes, for that. Now, before we just move to a couple of questions, I'm just going to invite Pierre Hagman, who's from the Swiss Embassy based here in Bangkok, who very kindly worked with us at ESCAP to host today's cafe. And it's my great pleasure. Please, Pierre, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gemma. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So greetings to everyone from the Embassy of Switzerland here in Bangkok. It's really a great pleasure for us to be a partner of this Stats Café. And I would like to congratulate the Statistics Division of ESCAP on this great initiative, actually, of having launched this Asia-Pacific Stats Café in the wake of the pandemic. While the current situation has been forcing us to keep our distance with each other, you really have managed to bring the Asia-Pacific statistical community closer than before. And I think this is very, very inspiring. So kudos for that. And I remember that when we first discussed with you, Gemma, in June about how we could work together to increase the visibility of the upcoming UN World Data Forum, the answer was easy. Let's use this new platform you have created. And here we are today with this 15th edition of the Stats Café. So at the embassy here of Switzerland in Bangkok, we are very excited about it, and we feel very grateful that so many distinguished speakers, including the Minister from Mongolia, Her Excellency Ayush Aryunzaya, have joined us today. So of course, we would like from the embassy side to thank all the speakers for their valuable contributions today. Data have become so important nowadays, and I'm not a statistician and I don't deal with issues related to data management. However, in my daily job as a diplomat, data are just critical to allow me and my colleagues at the embassy to understand global and national realities and trends. For instance, here in Bangkok, we have to constantly fine-tune our actions based on the reality of the countries we engage with, and reliable data are just an essential part of our assessment. So this has become even more true with the pandemic, as it was said, that has upset so many socio-economic indicators. So without good data, we just realize here on a daily basis, we simply run the risk to be blindsided, to take irrelevant decisions, and to waste our resources. From today's exchange, I just would like to highlight, if you allow me, the following 3 elements. First, the demand for data and statistics has increased significantly with the adoption of the Agenda 2030. Politicians are requesting more such information in order to make good and efficient decisions. They want to work on the basis of facts and evidences. We also heard that actions has to be taken now to make this happen, and we need to get more and better data. In this regard, we heard the expression, a trusted data ecosystem that we can rely on. And we also heard that at this stage, in this regard, we are off track. So there's a lot of work to do. Second point, the pandemic shows how important disaggregated data is, especially in relation to the most vulnerable people. The call to leave no one behind is more relevant than ever. And data and statistics must reflect this situation as well as possible. But of course, without more and better funding, as we heard, this will not be possible. And the challenge, as it was also mentioned, is how to bridge the 2 worlds of the statistical world and of the development agencies and policymakers. How to make this latter realize how important it is to invest in statistics, and how we should develop a better narrative to convince the decision makers to invest in statistics. Third point I would like to highlight, the Bern Network is actively working on solutions to improve the funding situation for data. And the planned Clearinghouse for financing development data, we heard a lot about, which should be a kind of matching platform between funding and needs, a kind of win-win tool for everyone. And also the action described by Paris 21, that shows that there's a way to get more and better funding. And when we talk about more and better funding, it also means funding which is more efficiently spent. And in this regard, the domestic funding should play a key role. To conclude, I would like to say that it's very important that this discussion about financing data for development continues globally. And in this spirit, of course, we would like to invite you all to participate, as it was also said, in the upcoming virtual UN World Data Forum, starting actually Monday in 2 weeks. And of course, especially in the session on the Bern Network, which will take place within this virtual forum. And of course, we are looking forward to meeting you all and to welcome you all next year in October in the Swiss capital, Bern, for the 3rd UN World Data Forum. And of course, the Asia-Pacific region contribution to these events will be key. Embassy of Switzerland in Bangkok, here we are very glad that today's event constitutes an Asian contribution to the so-called Road to Bern series of events leading to the UN World Data Forum. We hope, of course, that other Road to Bern events will take place in the region until October next year. And should you be interested in organizing such events, please do not hesitate to contact us or to reach out to the Swiss Federal Statistical Office. Last but not least, I would like to thank everyone, of course, for joining today's event, but especially you, Gemma, and your team, ESCAP Statistics Division, for this very successful cooperation. So many thanks again, and back to you, Gemma.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Pierre. No, we're very happy to partner with you and the entire team that we have here today. including Benjamin Rothen, who's from the Swiss National Statistics Office, is with us as well. We have time now for some questions and answers, or questions, and hopefully we'll hear some answers from our panelists. I'm going to throw the first question that we had from the pre-consultation, and maybe this one is I could ask you, Thomas. The question comes that I've got a couple, but the first question I'd like to ask is how can statistical officers present development partners important initiatives for technical and finance assistance that are aligned with the country's national interests and not necessarily the interest of development partners? So the question is, how can the national stats officers have their priorities considered rather than the priorities of the development partners? Thomas.
Thank you. I think your question is critical and is really core to the whole issue. Let's remember the 2030 agenda is the countries themselves are in the lead, and the whole setup of the development partners has actually shifted to some extent, and whereas let's say in pre-2015 a lot of emphasis was placed on capacity building of countries, etc. This has somewhat taken a back seat, and which is unfortunate actually, because capacity building is also about sustainability and long-term investments, etc. We need to realize that in this COVID-19 crisis, the urgency of what is to be done has even increased. So there is a risk of humanitarization of development cooperation. We just, instead of going to strengthen the local municipalities, the local government levels, everything goes through the center and through our big organizations. They have an important role to play, but let's remember that the strength of the local fabric of the relationship between governments and civil society is what's going to make a difference. And so the statistical agencies need to team up with their ministries of planning and their ministries of finance. And they need to come together and approach the development partners in this way. I mean, that is a very straightforward answer. It's not easy to do, but we development partners, we need to hear that very clearly. The UN system needs to hear that very clearly from the ministries of finance, from the ministries of planning. It's not such a large amount of money compared to the international public finance that is coming into a country. But if the ministries of finance, the ministries of planning locally don't prioritize it, then it's not going to come very strongly on our agenda. And the risk is that the funding continues to be like driven from the outside rather than from the inside.
That's a really wonderful answer there, Thomas. So it's basically saying that National Stats Office needs to partner more strongly within its own government, with its planning ministry, with its finance ministry, to come as a government, not just as a stats office, but as a government, as a united front. And following up on that, we have a question from Timor-Leste, who it's slightly similar, but it's a bit different. Based on your experience, how effective is the narrative statistics helping the policy to make the right decision? Are the statisticians and the countries giving you the right narrative to make the right decision as a development partner?
I would say that the Agenda 2030 and the fact that the SDGs have targets and have indicators, and that we're talking about statistics and data around the SDGs and the achievement of the SDGs is very critical to this. I mean, we're realizing that we're actually not just working towards a common vision, but that there are metrics around that. But the problem is we development partners tend to be impatient, and we tend to rely more strongly on our own data, and that's the issue. So we need that message that we need to realize that the National Statistical System, not just the government, also the civil society that is involved, that everyone is nimble and agile and moving quickly, adapting to situations such as the one we have now with COVID, and not saying, well, we'll see what happens during the next census, but actually being part of the discussion of strengthening the data around COVID. I mean, the example that Johannes gave just now is a very strong one. Well, the statistics system has to be part of that, in the center of that, so that we feel it as development partners.
Thank you very much. And Johannes or Benjamin, do you want to add anything to these questions that have come from our audience?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then Benjamin can maybe follow if he wants. Now, this is an important question, and let me maybe complement the picture that Thomas has just maybe more sketched out from the 8 agency perspective. The alignment, I think the starting point are the national plans, as was mentioned in the question. So countries have national plans that in an ideal world are SDG compatible. I mean, they are in line. I mean, there has been a discussion, hopefully, with all development, with different groups of society in a country to agree what is the objectives I want to fulfill, that we want to achieve as a country. There is a national plan, and then you have these national statistical plans. I mean, as we know very well in our community, the NSDSs, that should be aligned to the National Development Plan and to the SDGs. And with this, ideally, in an ideal world, you would start the conversations with donors, and donors would align to these plans. That would be in an ideal world. Now we know for different reasons that it's not always happening this way. And I think what we should maybe aim for is an improvement of, I mean, it will never be perfect. And this is because of, I think Thomas alluded to, that 8 agencies have, of course, also their own, I think, priorities that they follow. I mean, you have different agencies supporting, for instance, more focus on education, or more focus on agriculture, or more focus on health, which is, I think, is okay. But I think that for me, the critical point would be to bolster and to create the national statistical offices in this data stewardship, the role of somebody who can coordinate between the different producers and users in a country, and to be also so that statistical office could engage more into this conversation with donors. We know often that sometimes for certain reasons, infrastructure investment in laptops or in certain things, one might sort of follow a certain line of funding opportunities, but maybe sometimes, and I heard this from a given country in Africa, where the statistical office said, no, I don't want the money at this time, even if I get more laptops. I make it a bit simplified here, because it's not aligned with what we want, period. So I think it's the capacity of, and also the boldness of a statistical office and of the leadership, the senior management, to engage within the other partners of government, planning ministries, other line ministries, central banks, and others, but also with societies. And let me just add one point, which seems to me critical, is the alignment and where could be eventually new partners for statistical offices. I think in the past, the last maybe 10 years, there was a lot of enthusiasm, as we all know, that statistical offices should engage with private sector providers of data. This has become, like the GAFAs, and we could all use these mobile phones, and it will be also exciting to produce official statistics. To some extent, it has been a bit of a disappointment. I mean, let's be very clear, because the incentives of the private companies to share data for the official use of statistics production hasn't maybe there, and there are lots of legal issues. That this data is great for development purposes is by all means taken, but to help statistical office produces official high quality data as an input, yes, but there are lots of open questions. Where I wanted to get is, and this is Paris 21 had started a very nice initiative with the Philippine government, and I see that one of our Philippine colleagues and friends is here, on subnational level to engage with citizen-generated data. This is something I think the statistical community hasn't been followed up. I think for understandable reasons, but I think it's maybe time to change. If we want to, if we want to align more the needs of the countries, I mean, citizen-generated data and engaging with citizens groups could be a way where I think it's many more things to be done. And this is not like a naive. I mean, I'm very aware that citizens groups is not per se something. It could be very powerful interest groups, right? I mean, but if you think it through, I mean, look at citizens groups. I'm thinking more about people, mothers who evaluate maternal health care and who give feedback, or feedback from community users of sewage systems or educational systems or health systems or sport facilities or public transport, those kind of data. And if the statistical office would provide tools that they can assess those things, I think we need to really drive more into look into this in terms of aligning what the governments want, and also then drives the donors to those kind of projects that can help bringing in line what the citizens are and what is really needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Yeah, thanks for bringing in that citizen-centric, citizen science data and the citizen. It actually complements Thomas's comment extremely well about this, the fabric. I really like your narrative there, the fabric between the public sector and the citizens, and the 2030 agenda gives that architecture that promotes that fabric. Benjamin Roth, Benjamin's online. Benjamin's from the National Statistics Office in Switzerland. Benjamin, did you want to add anything here?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, also from my side. Thanks to give me the floor. Of course, Thomas, Ayush, and Johannes, of course, I think covered most of the points, but I just want to add one a bit a broader topic. I think it was last week we had the 5 years of anniversary of the adoption of the 2030 agenda. And I think if we're looking back, I mean, in the world of statistics, we have anyway quite coming far, because the 2030 agenda was a game changer for the statistical community. I mean, as well, I mean, Gemma, you know that quite well, Johannes knows it very well, and Thomas have seen it from the other side. 10 years ago, the Statistical Commission was really just a body of experts talking about census and producing data and statistics, and that's true, that's important. But I think sometimes, as I can see, the 2030 agenda helped really to bridge the gap between the user world and the producer world. And I think that's crucial, and to make step forwards, also to include more than just official statistics. Of course, that has to be the basis of the monitoring of the 2030 agenda, of supporting political programs, and of course also to monitor the process we are doing on national level, on the global level. And then when the Statistical Commission founded the UN World Data, I think that was a very smart move, because then you bring these kind of people together and you find out, hey guys, what do you need and what should we produce for you? And I think what was mentioned here, the citizen science for official statistics, I mean, there's a lot of data around the world we should and can use in the future. Of course, it has to be usable. It's not that easy. It doesn't mean that just if you have a lot of data, they're good data. That's not the point, but I think everybody here knows that. But I think I would just want to thank you, Gemma, and everybody who organized this Stats Café, because I think it's exactly the way to go in the future. And I mean, we have still 10 years left to fulfill the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Some will be fulfilled, some not, but I'm thinking already a bit further. There will be an Agenda 2045, or I don't know how we'll call it, but I think for statisticians and statistical offices, it's important to consider how to have this connection and this bridge to the users. And so that's why, and also can echo what Pierre from the Swiss Embassy said, this is fantastic to have this kind of Stats Café. We have the road to Bern. I can share the link directly in the chat in a few seconds. Let's talk and bring concrete outcomes to the UN World Data from already this year and especially next year. I think it's good to have discussions. We need that, but we also need to have some products and that help to implement the 2030 agenda and finally just to create better lives on our planet. And I think that's important to say that sometimes not just talk about data and statistics, but to know why we are doing that. So I just invite everybody here on this chat and this call. If you have some interesting ideas to support the discussions for the UN World Data Forum, you can contact me all the time. And I'm pretty sure we'll find the next 50 weeks, we find a slot to prepare concrete outcomes for the UN World Data Forum next year in Bern. Thanks, Gemma.
Yeah, thank you very much, Benjamin. Just a reminder to everybody online, if you do have questions, please do raise your hand. We received about 5 questions beforehand, so I'm just slowly putting those to the panel. But if you have any fresh questions based on what you've heard today, please do put them forward. So the next question is, it builds on the previous one and Johannes's comment there, the engagement with the private sector. So I know we talk about engaging with the private sector in terms of getting access to data for the purpose of producing official statistics. But the question is slightly different here. Who is the development partner? And the Bern, the Clearinghouse is this matchmaking site. And are you expecting there to be matches with the private sector? And what's the appetite for the private sector to be investing in capacity building, which is a slightly different question to the private sector sharing its data for the purpose of official statistics. So I'll ask the question specifically, what's the most effective approach to seek funding from private sector for the improvement of statistics? And I'm in your hands. Johannes, would you like to kick off on this one? Because you prepare a report every year that's got a good overview of the investment partners. Johannes.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question. I think I would approach it from the perspective that maybe one should differentiate the funding resources for what. I think what we will be talking about here is if you talk about official statistics, it's a sort of term that we have defined as statisticians, so I don't need to tell you this with the 10 principles of fundamental statistics and what that means. And I think in the debate, sometimes we confuse or we collude this with data production, generally speaking, I mean, for development. And I think we need to separate. Let me explain why I think we should separate those two things and why it matters for the funding question. You know, as a person interested in development for the last 30 years or so and working in the field in very different areas, I mean, we know that the data question is critical to all our, I mean, look at agriculture, look at health, and we have made the arguments. And we don't need necessarily official statistics for many of the questions that we are interested in. We don't need this. And many SDGs, I mean, on purpose, we know we don't need official or statistics. And the quality of the data that you need as an academic or as a decision maker might be very different on certain needs and perspectives. It's just good to know how the quality is, and then you make a decision. And then we know anyway that the final, you know, our reasoning that good data leads to good policies, and then those good policies will improve better lives. Often the decisions making, quality data is just one aspect. There are many other reasons why people, as we have seen very recently in important debates, that there are other considerations as well. So where I'm trying to get is, I unfortunately, and I think, you know, I'm not the one, because I often hear in this, yeah, we have to approach the private sector for fund us. I have been in a couple of conversations with the private sector, and we couldn't even find a common ground of conversation because they were talking about something completely different. It was not about this public good that I was really alluding to, and I think in my view, and happy to be challenged on this one, for official statistics, the funding has to come more from governments. I mean, it's a public role, it's a public thing, and we have aid. And I think it's not the question so much. It's more like to find the right narrative. The money is there. I mean, if you look at spending patterns for data and statistics in over, as you mentioned, we monitor public spending on data and statistics, Gemma, the press report, and the new one will come out. We do it since 10 years actually. It is less than 1% of ODA. It's 0.5%, and sometimes it's 0.4. And I mean, which tells you something. I mean, I think we haven't done our job clearly enough to convince that this is a good investment. And instead of getting lost and reaching out to the private sector for this specific purpose, I'm not saying for the other one, but taking the question of, I don't think, I mean, maybe in certain specific circumstances, you might will get fund for a specific investment opportunity. I mean, Facebook, I've seen there now investment in gender statistics. But again, I mean, Facebook has a very specific interest. And I'm not sure if we actually want this in the first place, because if you team up with the private sector, and the private sector has a very different narrative. So if your objective is to produce quality, verifiable statistics that is good for a given purpose, getting funding from the private sector already is a bit of... So basically, my main point would be, let's not get confused. If it's about official statistics, find the money from your government, and we have just to work harder and make the case. Thank you.
May I just add a point to that, Gemma?
Definitely, yes. Over to you, Thomas. Yeah.
I agree with Johannes, except for one point. Governments tend to listen to the private sector. So if we want governments to prioritize national statistic systems, it's important that they hear the message also from the private sector. So when the private sector says we need a better framework, a better environment to make business, to do business, then part of that better environment is also better denominators for whatever statistics we're handling. And I think that is a question of narrative where there can be an alliance between the private sector and the statistical community.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Thomas. No, I agree. I think working in the government, this partnership you have to have with the planning and finance ministries, and those finance and planning ministries are being talked to so regularly by the private sector, by the political system, by citizens, by all the advocacy groups, all the professional groups. So they get pressure from so many different angles. And I think it's finding this fabric. I quite like your language there, Thomas, the fabric between each of the players within the public sector and the people they're fabricked with, this web of people they're connected with, is very good analogy. So thank you for that honest answer there, Johannes. I think this is a tricky one, getting the investment from the private sector, and your good question, do we actually want it or not? The third, again, I haven't got any hands up, but look, let's just ask you one more question. And the question came from one of our colleagues here in the ILO in Asia Pacific. Considering the already low levels of donor contribution to statistical development, and Johannes, you said it there yourself, like less than 1% of ODA, how can the statistical community mitigate the likely disastrous impact of COVID-19 pandemic? And, do you think COVID-19, like I'll just add to that, like we're already seeing low levels. Do you see the COVID as having a good impact, a negative impact? Do you see it as an opportunity, or do you see this is going to make it even more difficult to even get the 0.1% investment in statistics and data? Thomas.
Well, I mean, I think that there's in this crisis, there's two opportunities that the statistics community needs to seize. The first one, Johannes mentioned it, all of a sudden, statistics is in our living rooms every day when we look at the data on how the crisis is evolving, etc. The statistics system at a national level, the statistics community needs to be part of that, needs to be part of making that information more granular. Remember that even what we see, from John Hopkins, etc., is very averages, and they don't really tell us what's happening in our communities, in our cities, etc. And so helping to break that down, that is an opportunity that the statistics officers can do. The second opportunity we need to seize as a statistics community is we're supposed to be the ones that are tech savvy. And so we should be right out in front there, showing that our business can be done even from home, even from our office. I mean, this whole home office, let's say, new era in which we are, the statistics community should be right in front of that, and showing that we're on the ball, and making sure that we are inspiring to our community, that the population sees the statistics community in this crisis.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, I see opportunity. I also see opportunities in this very unfortunate pandemic. But Johannes, and then Benjamin, I'll come to you as well. Johannes.
Yeah, I think first of all, I mean, we have been monitoring, and as Gemma, you know very well, I mean, we have been as a community reaching out to statistical offices all around the world, how they are doing, and we see all the challenges they are facing in terms of not being able to do to knock on the door and to ask for, I mean, to put it very simple, to ask how much does your bread cost, and to do proper inflation rates. And so the business model of official statistics has been seriously affected all over the world, and also in countries where maybe the IT infrastructure and the cloud-based system working hasn't been there. I mean, we work also in very poor countries. And I think it's amazing to see that all over, one can see that the statistical offices have, on average, I'm saying, actually responded quite well. And as Thomas said, I mean, it changed business models, adjusting to this new life, and delivering data and statistics under very difficult circumstances. So that's the good news, I would say, and I think they also here, people here on the call have to be congratulated for it, and making this important part. What I can also see, and I can give you one little example to make it more transparent, or what I think is the talking about the good work. I think statisticians often are not so good in talking about their own good work, and I mean, this aspect of communication, as well as the use of data, and why official statistics is so important. That's maybe a part where the community needs to step up a bit more. For instance, we analyzed Twitter feeds of statistical offices. So we run through Twitter, and we used a certain code to see when and how and what official statistical offices tweeted after the pandemic, and what were the communication plans behind, and so. And it has been, it took statistical office a long time to be really present in the debate. So what I see where we have more work to be doing is to be visible, not only doing the good work, but also to be very visible in a given country's discussion that this data, quality data, matters. unfortunately, I have to say, if I look at debates that I'm following in Europe, but also in countries where we work, you see, I mean, there's of course the health professionals who are very, dominant and talk about data. There are sometimes economists, but I haven't seen any op-ed. I haven't seen any contribution from national statistical offices on the quality of data and the argument that we were talking about. And I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity if the conversation now turns into the hopefully building back better. I mean, the resilience and the conversation around, how can we as societies build back better to avoid when the next crisis hits that we are built. I think we need to be more visible in the conversation. So the critical issue again for me is something that we observed before, the questions about impact and use of data, the question about communication budget for statistical offices being there. And I think, I mean, I can say this because I know the chief statistician of Switzerland quite well, who is very much engaged with the statistical office and present in debates as a neutral provider of information. So I think the opportunity is there, but we have to step up very quickly, because otherwise people might say, hey, where have these guys been? Where are they? I mean, I couldn't see them, and this was the moment they could have been there, and then that could lead to some even further bad consequences for the community. So yeah, it's a bit of ambiguous, but there is an opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. Benjamin, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I just can give some response to what Johanna said a bit. I mean, I agree on that during the COVID-19 crisis, I think for statistical office, it was very difficult to work some part. But I guess you can find on your UNSD page, there was a questionnaire sent out by the UN to all the national statistical offices to find out how they could provide the information. And not just on health. I mean, it was quite difficult to produce some data and statistics during that time. But Johannes, haven't seen that much cooperation, but then maybe you should come again to Bern, because we have a close collaboration now with health ministries to support the data production, to give more information on the health situation in Switzerland by daily basis. And of course, it's quite difficult because just the number, how many people are getting infected today, doesn't say that much. I mean, you have to link it to other data sets, and that's what we are trying to do. That, and I think I saw many statistical systems that they did that. I think it can be improved, and I think it's quite difficult anyway to collect information about a crisis you don't understand completely still at the moment, but I think that's the way to go. And I mean, I invite you again, come to the virtual UN World Data Forum, because this is of course the key topic to do that. But I want to echo one point that's not directly linked to the crisis, what Johanna said. I think statisticians are very good in producing data and statistics, and I think the quality is very high. But the last step to publish it, to sell it, to communicate it, it's still, I mean, it's not the first time we have heard that since years. There needs to be more investment on that. I think it's important to produce census, but you have to tell to people we are here. And Johannes mentioned also Facebook producing gender statistics. I'm not that skeptical what I have seen until today, but anyway, I think we have to work with them. We have to find out how can we combine that, but we also have to tell them, like, if you're producing data and statistics, and do it under some following some rules. And I think that's also part of the UN World Data Forum. Again, to conclude from my side, dialogue is important. We are sitting all on the same planet. Let's work together. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Benjamin. And look, I actually fully agree with Johannes's point there about the communication. And in fact, we started today's cafe with this. Let's make sure the narrative is correct, whether it's the narrative to the development partners. Here we've heard about the narrative to our finance and planning ministries, narrative to citizens, and certainly the World Data Forum in 2 weeks' time is also about having a narrative with our users, because it's both a user and a producer conference. here in Asia, in ESCAP has been prepared just a portal, if you like, where we've been tracking which the NSO responses to COVID-19. And I've shared a link in the chat box there. We've been basically just providing a hyperlink to any NSO that has created a NSO COVID-19 specific website. And of the 58 countries in our region, 12 of 58 have got something on their main webpage that mentions COVID-19. So in terms of visibility and stepping up to say now's the time to let public know that here is what the statistical community can offer, I think there is still some room to move there in terms of getting out the COVID-19 response through the statistical community. So I think I'm now going to draw this to a close. It's been a wonderful hour and a half. To all of you who joined us today, thank you so much. I hope we've covered your questions and the questions that came in beforehand. I really would like to thank everybody who was with us today. Pierre Hagman from the Swiss Embassy here in Bangkok, who we first spoke with about holding this Road to Bern event today. Thomas Garth and Benjamin Rothen from the Swiss government, from the South Cooperation Department, as well as from the National Stats Office. Johannes Uting coming to us from Paris 21, as well as Francesca Perucci and Her Excellency Ayush Arianzi from the Mongolian government. And we do look forward to seeing you at the Virtual World Data Forum in 2 weeks' time. But more importantly, I do hope we can all see you at the World Data Forum in Bern in 2021. Very much looking forward to it. And thank you, speakers. It's been a very good session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.